The pink-haired girl thought about how unfair and dirty this world was, but Jeffrey calmly said that he wouldn't worry so much. He added that he thought the girl was definitely of noble blood, and she muttered in response that all this would be just fine. Standing up, Aurora asked if they always did it this way, and Ettica asked what she meant. Audrey screamed angrily that all the aristocrats were so rude to him, and the blonde even blushed a little from such concern. The girl added that for people who advocate class division so much, they were not behaving decently or aristocratically at all. She asked why he was so calm when even she was angry, and the man replied that it was not the first time, and then stroked her cheek. Jeffrey stated that she was a much more significant figure and said he wished he had done more, asking where her moonstone necklace was. The pink-haired girl cried out in embarrassment that they didn't match her outfit, but from now on she would wear it all the time, even as a bracelet. Ettica gently reassured the girl and stated that he did not want to make her upset, adding that now it was time for the bride to get some rest. The blonde gently touched the bruise on her cheek, cooling it with his abilities to soothe the pain. The next day, she was looking at a pile of letters on the table, wondering what they were, and the groom said that she could look, but they would all burn. Opening one of the envelopes, the pink-haired girl unfolded the message and realized that it was a proposal, stating that someone wanted to marry Jeffrey. The girl asked if all this had really arrived just today, and the man replied that it was all the efforts of the nobility and those who wanted to arrange for their daughters. The fair-haired man added that now they have more important matters to attend to, the main one being the need to prove the bride's status. Aurora said that she had only come up with fake documents, but the Duke said that it would not work because they were being watched and they would definitely be caught. Sighing, the future Duchess raised her head and asked if the constant study of her past, forgotten life had borne any fruit. Ettica answered negatively, and she buried her face in her palms, not hiding her indignation and thinking that now that very end would definitely come for her. Following his bride's gaze, the man said that he simply wanted to clarify whether she was sure that she did not remember anything about what happened to her. Jeffrey asked if it was time to tell the truth, and Aurora looked at him confused, asking what he meant. The Duke asked if she would continue to pretend that she had amnesia, adding that he seemed to be patient enough. Realizing that her lie had been exposed, Audrey said that she didn't know what to say, and if she could figure out what was going on, he would already know. Ettica replied that he couldn't let her lie go today, and the girl asked what solution he was considering. The pink-haired girl blushed brightly and opened her unusual eyes when she heard from the man that they would need to get married. Leaning forward on the couch, Aurora asked if he was serious, and Jeffrey responded in the affirmative, asking why not. The Duke declared that this was the only way to save her, although he could start a rebellion against the Emperor, but the girl would be against it. Audrey mumbled something unintelligible, and the man asked if it was possible that she simply did not want to marry him. The pink-haired girl said that for her, marriage should be built only on true love and mean something, hinting at the emergence of sympathy. Jeffrey wondered if it was too much to ask, since survival came first, and love was meaningless if you were dead. He noted that, in addition to everything else, if she saw him often over the course of several years, her demands on men would increase greatly. Although the girl remained silent in response to these words, her facial expression openly showed displeasure and even indignation. A little later, she spent time drinking tea and thanking the prince for standing up for her before the emperor himself. Holding the cup in the air, the dark-haired man replied that he didn't need thanks, asking if they had found a solution to that problem. The girl nervously noted that, in the worst case, she would have to get married, and Jean muttered that she didn't seem to be happy about it. Unable to hold back an unhappy sigh, the pink-haired girl openly replied that she did not want to get married just for the sake of survival. The prince spread his arms wide and said that marriage was a very important step, and therefore he could understand her worries, and Audrey smiled. She muttered that Jeffrey hardly cared, and thought about the fact that her fiancé was always worried about her, but did not understand her feelings. Setting his cup down on the porcelain saucer, the prince casually remarked that in Jeokir, no one paid attention to a person's status. He added that their history knew of cases where kings married commoners, and the pink-haired girl asked if this was all true. The brunette suggested that the girl move in with him, and even if he had to go against the emperor, he wouldn't help if she wanted it. Aurora waved her hands and hastened to say that she did not want to burden him, but Jean said that saving the girl was not a burden for him. Audrey blushed brightly when she heard from the man that if she needed his help, he was always there to help her. She tenderly thanked His Highness, and the brown-haired man took another sip of the warm drink, declaring that he was not doing this out of gratitude. After a while, Angela looked onto the terrace after a preliminary knock and asked for forgiveness for the sudden intrusion. The maid informed her mistress that His Majesty was expecting her, and she immediately stopped smiling, trying to guess what he might need. A little later, at an audience, the Emperor, propping his cheek with his fist, said that thanks to the future Duchess, he had had a great time yesterday. She bowed and said that she was glad, as if she had brought joy to His Majesty, although she did not think so, but the man suddenly said that he had news. The monarch explained that, as the girl had wished, Count Barbarius would be punished, and then asked if she was pleased, and Aurora clarified whether this was true. The Emperor replied that even Prince Gyokira stood up for the girl yesterday, which meant that he trusted her, and she did her job well. The ruler added that the lands of Barbarius would be given to the ownership and management of Ettic, and the status of the count would be reduced to Viscount. Feeling confused, the pink-haired girl thanked His Majesty, still not believing that this freak kept his word so easily. Her eyes widened when Aurora heard that, to avoid rumors and displeasure from the nobility, he dropped the charges of cruelty. Audrey stated that there were many witnesses, but the man stated that this was not enough and that these slaves should appear in person and testify. The Emperor asked the girl if she understood how the laws of the state worked, explaining that he could not act contrary to them. The pink-haired girl bowed, but she was only thinking that if she wanted to achieve justice, she had to find even more evidence. She remembered Phrenesis, immediately planning to talk to him and her fiancé about possibly testifying before the Emperor. Evening gradually descended on the palace, and the girl reflected on the fact that she had completed at least one task, and Nephthys would be pleased. Later, Aurora informed everyone about the Emperor's orders and that the territory of Barbarius was coming under the jurisdiction of Ettic. She said that although not everything was completely resolved, they need not worry, and the lady said that this was indeed a great relief. The future Duchess asked to tell this news to everyone, because reconstruction will begin soon, and they will all be busy with other things. The girl said that she would do it right away, but their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a knock on the door, after which the maid asked for forgiveness. Elena, who was standing with an extremely gloomy expression on her face, said that they had guests, and Aurora stood up, asking why she looked like that. The pink-haired girl froze, her eyes wide, and felt a surge of extreme discomfort when she heard that Audrey's family and Lady Rubiana had arrived at the palace. Later, the Baroness asked if the girl really wanted them to stand there any longer, since even though she was a peasant, she shouldn't forget about etiquette. The future Duchess wondered whether the woman had always been so rude or had simply hit her head, losing all fear. The girl saw reinforcements in the form of knights behind the woman and mentally wondered if she would be able to win today. Looking down at them, the pink-haired girl stated that there was no point in following etiquette when meeting guests who were not invited. Sir Campbell asked why they had come, and the woman replied that he did not need to know, and that Aurora should stop acting like a hostess and let them in. Audrey said that there was nothing wrong with that, since Geoffrey himself had given her, as his fiancé, such powers, and the Baroness prepared herself for insults. Waving her index finger, Aurora motioned for them to look back and state that they could discuss any issues of interest with her security. She stated that the local knights of House Ettica were very fond of guests, and the Baroness noticed with fear how a knife flashed at her side. Rubiana suddenly waved her hands, advised them not to quarrel with them, and raised the scroll in her hands, as if it could solve problems in a jiffy. Taking off the red ribbon, the blonde said that they brought a message from His Majesty, and Aurora clarified what they were talking about. Unrolling the scroll, the Duke's daughter read out the decree and said that from that moment on, Julia Audrey should also live in this estate. Ruby stated that even if their love story was true, there was a question of marriage between two high society families. The blonde added that because of the deception, His Majesty ordered that the position of the bride should go to the real daughter. Folding her arms across her chest, the pink-haired girl said that she understood the order, but in that case, everyone except Julia was an uninvited guest. Unable to believe that anyone could defend themselves so calmly, the Duke's daughter asked if the others would just be thrown out. As she turned around, Aurora held the hem of her dress and declared that she would let them in today, but they shouldn't think that they were lucky. Geoffrey, sitting at his desk in the Ettica Guild in Rockstein, listened to the news and then said that he must have misheard. Wendell clutched the papers to himself and said excitedly that Baroness Audrey, her daughter, and Lady Rubiana were all now at the town estate. The Duke stood up and slammed the table, saying that Aurora wouldn't have let them in just like that, and then asked if they had gotten in by force. The adjutant reported that they had come with the Knights of Rudland, but had passed quietly with the order of His Majesty, and the fair-haired man clarified what was in it. Sweating nervously, the young man said that, while the investigation into Aurora's case was ongoing, Audrey's real daughter Julia would have to live on the estate. The man said it was just stupid, and the boy nodded a couple of times, saying that there was a carriage waiting outside, asking if he would be going there. Taking a small box from the inside pocket of his vest and pressing it to his chest, Ettica quickly walked forward, answering with consent. A little later, while sipping tea with the uninvited guests, the girl wondered if she could just throw them out and be done with it. Aurora watched the women laugh and discuss something, hoping that all this madness would end as soon as possible. They finally fell silent, only when the fair-haired man entered the reception room and said that he didn't know that they were expecting guests. Jeffrey demanded an explanation, and Ruby flew up to him, apologized, and said that they simply hadn't had time to prepare. The Duke of Rudland's daughter was clearly beside herself with love for the man, and muttered words so quickly that it involuntarily began to irritate. Looking at her shining face, Aurora wondered what was the point of helping Julia, because even if Ettica married her, Ruby would be left with nothing. The man walked around her in the most indifferent manner and looked at Julia, wondering if they were all going to stay here. Sitting down next to his bride, Jeffrey declared that they could not even hope for his earlier decision to change. The Baroness objected that it was not only a matter of choosing a bride, because for the aristocratic nobility, marriage was a real merging of two families. The future newlyweds silently listened to the woman's words that if they did not accept this girl, this engagement would be a sham. The fair-haired man, with a tired sigh, asked what the Baroness meant, and she replied that changing brides was a common occurrence. Pointing her palm at her daughter, she added that if the Duke spent more time with her, he would realize that she was much smarter and more graceful. Jeffrey asked if it was right that if he found a more beautiful and sweet woman than her daughter, he could change his mind again. The Baroness was taken aback and asked him to repeat what he meant, and Ettica said that he thought that this was exactly the logic he was talking about. The man said boredly that he heard their words, and then took out a red velvet box and said that they could stay if they wanted. He quickly added that he didn't know if they would want to be there after that, and suddenly knelt down, surprising Ruby and everyone else. The pink-haired girl's eyes widened as the Duke addressed her by name, opening the box as it was clearly an unexpected action. Showing his beloved a ring with a large, sparkling diamond, the blonde man asked with a smile if she would marry him. Rubiana, who had turned pale, asked if he really wanted this commoner, without family or tribe, without even a name, to become his wife and duchess. She screamed that it was illegal, because any nobleman above the rank of Viscount could not marry a commoner, either as his first or second wife. Turning gracefully, Jeffrey asked who had told the girl that he cared, and then added that if he didn't marry her, he wouldn't marry anyone. Looking again at his future wife, the man asked what her answer would be, and the obviously expensive ring began to shine in the box again. Aurora was upset by the visit of unnecessary people and worried about what was happening, because it was dangerous for each of them from the side of the law. A little later, the girl thought that in such a scenario, she simply had no choice, and the Duke asked for forgiveness for not warning her. Looking off to the side, the man said that she didn't need to worry, because he still promised that he would never fall in love and break the agreement. The pink-haired girl said that he was very convincing when he proposed to her, but despite this, she still believes him. Looking closely at the girl's upset expression, the Duke asked why she was so sad, receiving the answer that it was not so. Stepping towards her, Jeffrey shook his head and stated that she was not okay at all, and Aurora asked if he was going to calm her down now. The blonde man stopped, still not taking his eyes off his beloved, who was not delighted, and said that he would do it if she wanted. Ignoring the question, the future Duchess muttered that she was actually going to ask him one question that interested her. Looking down, the pink-haired girl felt how brightly her ears and cheeks were burning. She asked if the man liked it or not. Jeffrey was stunned when he heard this question and stared at the girl with such wide eyes that she had never seen before. Ruffling his hair, the man said that she couldn't possibly like him and that it was just a game, adding that he thought she could tell the difference. Aurora lowered her hands and quietly asked if all of this was just her imagination, and the man agreed. He asked wearily if it was really necessary to repeat it again, and all of Audrey's hopes, as one, were shattered on the cold floor of the spacious room. In fact, the girl always knew that the real part of Jeffrey looked exactly like this, and he would most likely refuse, but she just wanted to ask. The pink-haired girl apologized and stated that he was just doing his job so well that for a moment she believed him. Not knowing what else he could say after actually confessing his feelings, he simply calmly thanked the girl for the compliment. His bride, still without raising her head, said that after talking with the prince, Jokira suddenly began to imagine something incomprehensible. Jeffrey, who seemed to be suddenly more interested, asked what the man had said, and Aurora hesitated a little. She raised her head and replied that there was nothing in it that could affect their agreement, and therefore he had no reason to worry. Ettica listened silently to his interlocutor and stood as if carved from stone when she muttered that she hoped he would not flinch. She added that it would be awkward if he still fell in love with her, because in the end, the man promised that he would be her faithful dog. The Duke advised her to worry about herself because her prize might disappear into thin air, and the girl said that would never happen. The pink-haired girl folded her arms across her chest and asked if she could be free to go since they had already agreed on everything. Jeffrey agreed with this and wished the girl good night already when she headed for the exit straight past her fiancé. Already standing in the empty, spacious corridor, Aurora hit her forehead with her palm and then stroked her face, muttering that Ettica was just an idiot. The fair-haired man was left alone in the room and leaned his back against the wall, exhaling loudly and thinking about what was happening in his life. After a while, when Wendell asked what the reason for his quarrel with the lady was, he folded his hands together and said that he had ruined everything. The boy hesitantly asked how exactly, and the Duke sighed and explained that he had told the girl to stay away from him. The adjutant dropped his lower jaw and opened his eyes wide, asking what was the reason for such a strange and incomprehensible request. The fair-haired man said that it would be too cruel to let her get involved with his damn fate, and it would be wrong to court her. 2 days later, Aurora walked out onto the balcony, hearing the laughter of the Baroness and Ruby, and muttered a question about why those noisy ladies were always here. Angela suggested simply throwing them out, but her mistress muttered that they had come as Julia's guests and that this was no way to treat them. She added that if Jeffrey had been there, he could have sorted it out, but negotiations had stalled, and he had gone away for a while. The pink-haired girl asked if there was a response from Phrynesis, and when she received a negative response, she asked why it hadn't happened for such a long time. 2 days ago, Aurora sent him a letter in which she told him everything about Viscount Barbarius, asking if he wanted revenge. She might want to talk to Jeffrey about all this, but after that awkward conversation, she hadn't had the chance yet. Catching herself in these thoughts, she immediately thought with displeasure that the man, moreover, was rarely at home lately. The pink-haired girl was pulled out of her thoughts when she heard her name and stopped, and Angela, who was walking next to her, turned around at the same call. Aurora didn't have many options as to who the unfamiliar female voice could belong to, and she turned around with a less than pleased expression. The future Duchess asked who said that Julia could be so friendly with her, and the girl replied that she was considered her older sister. Immediately losing all traces of her smile, the girl asked if the real Audrey really knew everything, feeling worried about what they might think of her. Without hiding her shyness at all, the girl lowered her gaze and muttered what she had recently learned, immediately asking for forgiveness for not standing up for him. Folding her arms across her chest, the pink-haired girl said that if the girl wanted to be considered sisters, she should first say what she wanted. Julia shook her head in agreement and sighed, then quietly muttered that she simply wanted to share her thoughts. Aurora stepped a little closer and asked what thoughts exactly were being discussed, immediately hearing from her interlocutor that she did not agree with her mother. Angela watched the girl closely, and her mistress froze in surprise when she heard that Audrey never wanted to marry the Duke. The redhead added that she had been sick often since childhood and had cheated death so many times that it would not be an exaggeration to say that she was really ill. She said that she would like to do a lot more things in her life, but she just doesn't have the opportunity to do them. Aurora listened silently to her saying that, no matter how selfish it sounded, now that she was finally feeling a little better, she would live the way she wanted. Still continuing to tell her story, she said that she did not want to become the Duke's wife, but was attracted to a completely different destiny. The redhead muttered unhappily that she had not gone through all this in order to become a pawn in someone else's not very decent political games. The future Duchess clarified that she meant by this because her mother and Lady Rubiana were still here and wanted to ruin her life by prospering. The interlocutor muttered that the real problems might arise with Lady Rubiana because of her status, but they could try to keep her mother out. Then, the girl promised that she would not interfere in other people's affairs, and even if she was left alone with the Duke, there was nothing to worry about. The pink-haired girl couldn't help but think that this girl seemed indifferent, as if she didn't care at all about what was happening. Not intending to trust the girl so easily, she shared her thoughts that Julia clearly had another goal, and then asked what it was. The real daughter of the Audrey family suddenly answered unexpectedly that from early childhood, she found her dream in becoming a strong knight. She added that if she could become healthy enough to ride a horse and hold a sword, she would start protecting people. Aurora said with undisguised surprise that this was an amazing dream, and even though she didn't fully trust the girl, she wished her luck. Julia's eyes widened when she heard that she had defeated death so many times that she would surely be able to do it now. The future Duchess once again wished her interlocutor good luck and turned to leave, since continuing this conversation was rather pointless. After she had already started to leave, the red-haired lady bowed and apologized again on behalf of the entire Audrey family. Even when Aurora disappeared around the corner, Julia kept her head down and muttered that she was truly sorry, as if her family had dragged the girl into this. Meanwhile, Jeffrey sat in the Imperial conference room, thinking that he had no idea how stuck he would be here for. Tapping his finger on the table, the man thought that his beloved would hate him for leaving her alone with these parasites. Suddenly, turning to the prince, the Duke raised his head and calmly asked him if he was sure that his personal feelings were not involved in this matter. Smiling, the brown-haired man replied that he was only sitting there to conduct negotiations and had no intention of getting between Ettica and his bride. The sun lit up the room, and Jean expressed his gratitude for the Duke's help, thanks to which they were able to find the refugees near a.k.a. He added that if the Emperor found out about this, he would try to use them as human shields, and Jeffrey asked why he was being told this. Shaitan said that he knew that the Duke himself cared for the poor through his restaurant, and was even surprised by the fact that this was happening. Ettica asked what his real goal was, and the prince replied that if another war broke out, the Empire would not survive. To make it more convincing, he added to the men that this was clear to everyone, but the fair-haired man indifferently asked what followed from this. Jean explained that if a.k.a. became the last bastion, then there was hope for the Empire, and Jeffrey called this a very optimistic approach. The green-eyed man exhaled and shook his head a little, and then stated that he did not want to regret anything, and that was why he was making all these attempts. The Duke remained silent when he heard from him that if you do not try to act out of fear, life will never change for the better. The man immediately remembered Aurora's words, who said that even if she didn't succeed in the end, she would make every effort. Jeffrey asked to be closer to the matter, and the prince proposed to make a.k.a. the last stronghold, as well as to negotiate with other races. The Duke stated that if he were in the place of other creatures, he would simply refuse to make peace, since it was unprofitable, hearing in response that it was better to at least try. Ettica seemed to be taking a realist approach too far, so he just sighed and rubbed his temples with his fingers, releasing all the tension. Standing up, he replied that he agreed to make a.k.a. the last bastion, but he would have to hide it from the Emperor and also think about negotiations. Having reported all this, the fair-haired man turned around and said that it was now time for him to go. But the prince also stood up from his seat and called out to him. The brown-haired man suddenly leaned forward and asked if the Duke had thought about the safety of his beloved and fiancée, Aurora. Turning around already at the door, Jeffrey replied that it did not concern Jean, but he reminded him that war was inevitable, and the Duke would find himself on the front lines. The prince said that His Majesty had already set his sights on Aurora, and therefore she might even have to seek refuge in Geosira. Pulling his glasses off his face, the blonde man turned to Jean and stated that even if he had been silent up until this point, there was no need to cross red lines. Taking a few steps back, the man added that he followed the Emperor's orders not because he had to, but because he could. Stopping a few centimeters from his potential opponent's face, Ettica urged him to heed all these warnings. Meanwhile, in the mansion, the girls looked in surprise at the future Duchess, who asked them to accept gifts from her. Lady Rubiana, who was also holding a box in her hands, was clearly wary and asked what the need was. Folding her arms across her chest, Aurora sighed and said that it would be very stupid of her to forget about the gifts that are given as a farewell. The Baroness asked what this meant, and immediately screamed in anger when she heard from the girl that this was a hint that it was time for them to leave. The pink-haired girl silently listened to how during all this time, the Duke had not even come to say hello to his beloved, which meant that it was all a pretense. The woman screamed that they were being thrown out to cover up the deception, but Ettica's bride waved her hand, declaring that she did not want to talk and was tired. She added that she begged the Baroness not to come again, and she stared at her in surprise while Julia calmly remained silent. The girl explained that, although her daughter might be staying there, this was not a restaurant where one could come uninvited and engage in idle conversation. The Baroness again cried out that she would not leave until the Duke demanded it, because even she should not listen to the words of a peasant woman. As always appearing at the right time and at the right moment, the blonde-haired man said that the guest time was up because his bride's words carried weight. Walking towards them, the man asked Aurora for forgiveness and said that due to various reasons his return had been a little delayed. Looking at her fiancé, the pink-haired girl said that everything was fine, but he could have at least warned her that he would be a little late. Putting his arm around her shoulder, Jeffrey said that he was afraid that if he started writing a message, he would get very bored, and the girl asked if that was why he was silent. Ettica replied that he simply hadn't thought about it and didn't want to upset her so much, while Aurora couldn't tell if he felt guilty after the fight. She immediately remembered his indifferent and even mocking expression, as well as his words that everything that was happening between them was just a game. Looking closely at the face of her supposed husband, the pink-haired girl mentally decided to herself that he was pretending again. They communicated with each other for a long time, barely noticeable movements of their lips or eyebrows, glances, while Ruby burned with her jealousy. Unable to bear such behavior, the blonde turned on her heels and announced that she was leaving, and the Baroness called out to her in despair. Audrey said that she was also leaving, and only Julia answered with a bow that she would leave them alone, and then thanked her for the gift. After a few moments, the swearing, the exchanging of remarks, the rustling of dresses, and the clatter of heels on the floor finally died down, and they were left alone. The pink-haired girl thought about how uncomfortable everyone present was and threw off Jeffrey's hand, asking him to stop. The Duke again apologized for leaving the girl alone, and she said that everything was fine because he always does what he wants and she will get used to it. The fair-haired man clearly felt uncomfortable with such indifference, and therefore said that there was no need for it, and from now on he would behave better. With her arms folded across her chest, Aurora declared that it was all pointless, immediately asking why anyone would bother trying in a fake relationship. A blush appeared on her cheeks when Jeffrey said that whether she liked it or not, he would change for the better for her because he wanted to. Taking the topic aside, the girl asked how the negotiations had gone, and upon learning of Nephthys's positive response, she said it was a relief. The pink-haired girl looked at her fiancé with some surprise when he asked her if she had eaten, and then asked her to have dinner together. A few weeks later, all of Adele was teeming with rumors about Miss Julia Audrey, the reasons for her constant illnesses, and her love for the Duke. When the whisper reached Aurora's pink hair, she frowned in irritation and thought angrily about how long it had taken her to grow it. Angela assumed that all these people began to whisper because they recognized the lady by her rare hair color, and everyone understood that this was so. When several men were already following them, the maid advised the lady to bleach her hair, and a playful argument ensued between them. The three strangers overheard the maid asking if they should go back, and the pink-haired girl answering that she had no intention of hiding. Aurora froze, and Sir Campbell and Julia turned around when they heard the strangers ask if they were right in assuming that she was the Duke's fiancée. One of the company, apparently the leader, a blonde man in a green tailcoat, walked ahead of the others, and therefore it was he who asked if the girl's name was Aurora. When asked what family she came from, the girl barely raised an eyebrow, simply thinking that they wanted to piss her off. She picked up the hems of her dress and addressed the young people without even bothering to ask their names, and they were clearly offended. Looking closely at the supposed offenders, the pink-haired girl ingratiatingly asked what family they came from. Aurora asked why they thought she had to answer their questions, and the boy muttered that in noble circles it was customary to give a name. Raising an eyebrow, the girl asked if they had introduced themselves, and then followed up with the question of whether such an interrogation was noble. She, as if teaching uncomprehending puppies, declared that they should clearly be ashamed of such behavior, and the young men blushed with shame. Shaking her head from side to side in displeasure, the pink-haired girl said in a deliberately tragic tone that this was the future of the Empire. A moment later, they had already stepped aside, and Aurora asked her guard what he was writing down, hearing in response that he was writing down the names of the impudent people. After some time, when they had been walking down the street for some time, Angela turned to Miss and said that the hooligans were still here.